Just thinking. Today is January 10th, 2023, and we have made it out of 2022, barely sliding out of there. So today I want to cover something that has been driving me absolutely insane. Well, one of many things that are absolutely insane, but this one that I want to talk about today is this great zero carbon emissions. Really, what I think it is, just kind of roll that up into the WEF, Great Reset agenda. So the reason I wanted to bring this up, which has been driving me very crazy, is I started thinking back to when I was a young lad. And I remember when I was in school learning about something. Let me pull this up. Learning up about. I'm sorry, I thought I had it pulled up and then I didn't. Learning about something that was, pretty cool. It was something that was new, and I was just learning in science, and I thought, wow, this is really neat, because what was really important about it is that our lives depended on it, right? So that is photosynthesis, right? Now, this is the National Geographic website, right? So as for now, this is what stands. I'm sure they're going to change the definition to this, like they've changed the definition to what a woman is or man is, or what gender is and all that stuff. So I'm sure this will change very soon to meet the agenda. But it says that most of life on Earth depends on photosynthesis. The process is carried out by plants, algae, and some types of bacteria, which capture energy from the sunlight to produce oxygen, O2. And the chemical energy stored in glucose, a sugar, herbivores then obtain this energy by eating plants, and carnivores obtain by eating herbivores, right? So the process is, during photosynthesis, the plants take in carbon dioxide. Did you get that? Carbon dioxide. So that must mean that you have to have carbon dioxide, right? So that means the process, the way this is made, could not be possible without carbon dioxide and water, H2O, from the air and the soil. Within the plant cell, the water is oxidized, meaning it loses electrons, while the carbon dioxide is reduced, meaning it gains electrons. This transforms the water into oxygen and the carbon dioxide into glucose. The plant then releases the oxygen back into the air and stores energy within the glucose molecules. Okay, folks. So let me ask you a question. Now, I'm not a scientist. I am not. I'm not a scientist. I can't even keep a plant alive. Okay, I can't even keep a plant. I can't even keep a plant alive, right? But I do remember third grade science class, and I remember learning about photosynthesis, and I remember learning that carbon dioxide was part of the process and a necessity. So you have to ask yourself, right, if we are going to go into this zero carb emissions, zero carb, how is it that photosynthesis is going to still exist? So this is to help the plants grow, the trees grow, the grass grow, your vegetables to grow, which most are done in a warehouse now and they're GMO. So, but that's what this is for. And then those plants, trees, and grass produce oxygen for us to breathe. So you have to ask yourself, what was that? Oh, I'm not going to be able to remember. This is pre-recorded, so I'm not going to be able to see your answer. But they're something. Oh man, it's where basically they had the city everybody lived in inside of the wall, and thorax, and he wanted to get out. And he wanted to go find everything. All the trees were gone, and all the pollution had set in, and no grass existed. And they had to pay for air. They had fake grass and fake trees that they lived. Isn't that weird? How they always seem to give us heads up. Isn't that just crazy? Right? And now they want to get rid of CO2, carbon dioxide, which is going to stop photosynthesis, which is going to stop plant trees and grass from growing, which is going to stop air being produced for us, which means what? Suffocate? No. All right, so we're going to take a look at this. This is the Great Zero Carbon Conspiracy and the WEF's site, right? This is a great website if you haven't been on it before. It is called globalresearch.ca. That's Charlie Adam. So globalresearch.ca. Tons of great information there. All right, so all global research articles can be read in 27 languages, by the way. So if you want to read it in a different language, you can most definitely do so. Now, this was written back in February the 8th of 2021. So we're almost a year ago, right? The globalist Davos World Economic Forum is proclaiming the necessity of reaching a worldwide goal of net zero carbon by 2050. This, for most, sounds far in the future and hence largely ignored, right? That's another 30 years away. I ain't worried about that. I'll be dead by then, right? Yet transformations underway from Germany to the USA to countless other economies are setting the stage for the creation of what in the 1970s was called the New International Economic Order. Now, what does that mean? I just said in the 70s, it was called the New International Economic Order. Does that mean this agenda's been around for a little while? Nah, they just started. Right? They did right now? Okay. So in reality, it's a blueprint for a global, technocratic, totalitarian corporativism, one that promises huge unemployment, deindustrialization, and economic collapse by design. Consider some background. So our favorite little person over here to the right, Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum. You know what's amazing to me is how many people do not know what the World Economic Forum is. So I'm going to challenge you to do something over the course of for the rest of your life, please, but at least for the next couple of weeks, every time that you come in contact with somebody, I want you to ask them, do you know who the World Economic Forum is? And when they go, huh? Say, do you know who Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum is? And they're going to say, no, I don't know who that is. Well, you might want to look them up because they want you and your family all to be unalived. And then just walk off. I do this at the gas station. I do it at the grocery store. I do it everywhere. Now, I don't know how many of them when I walk away go, wow, that dude is crazy. But I also don't know how many of them go home and sit down in front of their computer and go, World Economic Forum, who is this? Right? Now, the thing is, you have to be careful with them because the way they word things, it make it sound pretty, but if you look at what they're doing, it's destruction of humanity, right? So Klaus Schwab World Economic Forum is currently promoting his favorite theme, the Great Reset of the world economy, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, right? The 2030 Agenda. There's a bunch of names for it. The key to it all is understanding what the globalists mean by net zero carbon by 2050. So the EU is leading the race, right? They're going to demolish all of the manufacturing in Germany this winter because they're so, it's going to be so cold there, and they're going to be such a shortage of natural gas because of the Nord 1 and Nord 2, and then the deal with Russia, that they're barely going to be able to keep their citizens alive and unfrozen. So they definitely don't have enough to run their manufacturing facilities. So you're going to see places like BMW, Volkswagen, places like that take some pretty serious major economic hits. Now, with a bold plan to become the world's first carbon neutral continent by 2050 and reduce its CO2 emissions by at least 55% by 2030. So in August of 2020, post on this blog, self-appointed global vaccine Caesar Bill Gates wrote about the coming crisis in climate. Man, this guy, Bill Gates, man, I wonder if, like, you know, did he all of a sudden become a prophet or something? I mean, it's just really strange. This guy is on top of it. He knows when vaccines need to be done. He knows when it's a good business to jump out of computers. He knows when, you know, pandemics are going to hit. He's already predicted the new pandemic for 2025. Now he already knows about the climate deals. This guy's a genius, super genius. As awful as the pandemic is, climate change could be worse. Like that, right? That's a good way to start that out, right? That's a really good way to start that out. Sorry, let me pop the screen back there. As awful as the pandemic is, climate change, well, that could be worse. A relatively small decline in emissions this year makes one thing clear. We cannot get to zero emissions simply, or even mostly, by flying and driving less. Now, I find this totally ironic, totally ironic, that this comes from a man who flies on a private jet everywhere he goes, which this dude is all over the place. So he's flying around a G5, one of 4 or 5 that he owns all of the time. He has 2 or 3 yachts, mega yachts, that take thousands of gallons of diesel per hour to operate. He owns numerous homes that are 8 and 10 and 15 and 20,000 square feet big, that are heated and cooled at all times of the year, whether he's president or not. Can you imagine how much lawnmower gas he goes through just to keep all those houses' yards done? But this is a man telling you that you existing in this world is ruining the climate. And the crazy thing is, some of you follow this crap and you just eat it up, like that little Greta Thunberg, whatever her name is, little 8-year-old activist came out of nowhere, getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to go around and talk. What the hell do you know? Nothing. You don't know anything. But you're a puppet because you reach the young people, right? Fired up today, folks. Fired up today. All right. So with the virtual monopoly on mainstream media, that's right. Mainstream media is controlled by 6 corporations, which are controlled by the elitists. In case you didn't know, wake the hell up. As well as the social media, which of course is run by apparently now the FBI. And that's who is running Twitter and Facebook. The global warming lobby has been able to lead much of the world into assuming that the best for mankind is to eliminate hydrocarbons, including petroleum, natural gas, coal, and even the carbon-free nuclear electricity. Now, we need to get rid of nuclear electricity, which has a 0 carbon emission. Why? Because it provides endless electricity, right? That we hopefully might avoid a 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade rise from an average world temperature. There's only one problem with this. It's a cover for a diabolical ulterior agenda. There's 1,500 scientists that sent in a deal that said global warming is not a problem. Now, these scientists are not the ones funded by the federal governments. These are independent scientists that don't get their grants, their money. Always follow the money. Always follow the money. For the jibby jab, all these people, all these doctors, all these the hospitals, they're funded by the NIH. Follow the freaking money, people. Open your dang eyeballs and follow the money. Follow the money, right? So here's the deal. Many have forgotten the original scientific thesis put forward to justify a radical shift in our energy sources. It was not climate change. Earth climate is consistently changing. It's always done that. It's correlated to changes in the emissions of solar flares or sunspot cycles affecting the Earth's climate. If you go back and you look at the temperatures, right, that since they've been, it's the same dang thing. Around the turn of the millennium, as the previous solar-led warming cycle was no longer evident, Al Gore and others shifted to the narrative in a linguistic sleight of hand to climate change, right? So they just changed the terminology, as they often do, change the wording, change the meaning of the word to fit the agenda, right? So from global warming to climate change. Global warming, oh, it's getting a little warmer, to climate change, right? Now the fear narrative has gotten so absurd that every freak weather event is treated as a climate crisis. Every hurricane, every winter storm, every tornado is claimed that that's actual proof that the climate gods are punishing us for our sinful CO2 emitting human nature, right? But wait, there's an entire reason for the transition to alternative energy sources, such as solar or wind, and abandoning carbon in energy sources is their claim to the CO2 is a greenhouse gas that somehow goes up to the atmosphere where it forms a blanket that supposedly warms the entire Earth below. Global warming, right? Gashouse gas emissions, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, come mostly from CO2. Hence, that's why their focus is on this carbon footprint. What's almost never said is that the CO2 cannot soar up into the atmosphere from car exhaust or coal plants or other man-made origins. Carbon dioxide is not carbon or soot. Let me make sure you say that again. I say that again. Carbon dioxide is not carbon or soot. It's an invisible, odorless gas essential to plant photosynthesis and all life forms on Earth, including you and me and your children. You know, those little beings that you're supposed to protect at all costs, no matter what it costs you. No matter what you have to do. Figured I'd throw that in there, including us, right? So CO2 has a molecular weight of just over 44, while air, mainly oxygen and nitrogen, has a molecular weight of only 29. So the specific gravity of CO2 is some 1.5 times greater than air. That would suggest that CO2 exhaust gases from vehicles and power plants do not rise into the atmosphere some 12 miles or more above the Earth to form some feared greenhouse effect. If it weighs 1.5 times more than the air, then you have to ask yourself a very basic logical question, some critical thinking, maybe even some common sense here. If it weighs 1.5 times more, how does it rise above? It doesn't. See, the problem is this stuff is so simplistic. If you just take the time to investigate it, break it down, and read about it, you'll find out how much of this is total BS, right? By the way, I'm totally healthy, totally sane individual with no unaliving intentions if anything ever happens to me, just that way. All right. So when you think about that, it can't rise, weighs 1.5 times more. Okay, so we're past that. So to appreciate what criminal action is unfolding today around Gates, Schwab, and their advocates of an alleged sustainable world economy that we keep hearing about, we must go back to 1968 when David Rockefeller, there's a name, right, and friends created a movement around the idea of human consumption and population growth were the major world problem. That's what the real problem is human consumption and population growth, right? So in essence, what the problem is here is we're taking up too much of their resources. We're swallowing up their air. We're taking up their grounds. We're polluting their oceans. And if there was just a lot less of us, it would be much more simple. They would have much more to themselves, and it would be amazing, right? So that's what the real major problem was. Rockefeller, whose wealth was based on oil, right, created basically a club of Rome at the Rockefeller Villa in Bellagio, Italy. Their first project was to fund a junk study at MIT called Limits to Growth in 1972. So, of course, they have their hands in education. Rockefeller donated a stupid amount of money into the education system, so he took control of that. He also is the person that put all the money into the pharmaceutical and medical industry. Oil, medical, school. Sound like some controlling mechanisms of an entire society, doesn't it? It's really strange. Wonder how that happened. A key organizer of Rockefeller's zero growth agenda in the early 1970s was his longtime Canadian oil man friend named Maurice Strong. Also a Club of Rome member in 1971, Strong was named Undersecretary of the United Nations, and Secretary General of the June 1972 Stockholm Earth Day Conference. He was also a trustee in control of that money for the Rockefeller Foundation. Maurice Strong was a key early propagator of the scientifically unfounded theory that man-made emissions from transportation vehicles, coal plants, and agriculture caused a dramatic and accelerating global temperature rise, which threatens civilization's so-called global warming. Now, he invented the elastic term sustainable development because we now know that cows farting and pooping is so detrimental to our society that we must get rid of them, and we must turn to plant-based meat, and we must become vegetarians. Do you know how important that protein and meat is to your body? Now, I know some of you that are vegans are going to jump on here and try to shred that apart. It's not up for debate. It's a scientific fact. Study the science. Follow the science, right? People that are vegans will find later on in life they will have a lot of health problems. Yes, they may feel better at the moment or whatever the case may be, as they state, right? But their long-term health effects, they tend to decline and deteriorate much faster as they get older. Again, that's a whole nother subject, a whole nother day, right? As chairman of the 1972 Earth Day and UN Stockholm Conference, Strong promoted population reduction, right? Those Georgia Guidestones, 500,000, right? Which now would be 500 million or something. I don't know the exact equation there. Strong promoted population reduction and lowering of living standards around the world to save the environment. Some years later, the same Strong stated. So, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Let me say that one more time for those of you sitting way in the back. Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? What does that mean? They wanted to lower the living standards. So, internet, electricity, big homes, lawnmowers, cars. That's all industrialized civilizations. They say no, 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 no. You need to go back to dirt house, campfire, hunt deer, caveman. That's where they want you. Nah, technically they want you alive. This is the agenda today known as the Great Reset or the UN Agenda 2030. Strong went on to create the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, a political body which advances the unproven claim that man-made CO2 emissions were about to tip our world into irreversible ecological catastrophe. Now, again, this was back in 1972, 50 years ago. So why haven't we experienced the irreversible ecological catastrophe that they promised? Because it's bullshit. Co-founder of the Club of Rome, Dr. Alexander King, admitted the essential fraud of their environmental agenda some years later in his book, The First Global Revolution. Okay, make sure I state that again. The co-founder of the Club of Rome, Dr. Alexander King, so this is the guy in charge of it that these guys are members of, admitted that the essential fraud of their environmental agenda some years later in his book. And here's what he said, right? The book was The First Global Revolution. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. Let me read that. Let me touch on that and I'll finish reading again. Global warming, that's a topic of today. Water shortages, we're seeing that all over. And also, when you go look at some of these places where they're experiencing shortages, you will find diversions where they diverted water off of rivers into holding tanks onto farmland that's either owned by the government or people they've paid to hold that diverted water to prevent people downstream from getting that water to water their crops or water their animals. Yep. So that's happening. Famine. We're about to experience some serious food shortages this quarter and next quarter. And people were like, oh, you've been saying that for 6 months. Yeah, it's called the process, right? You got to plant it. It's got to grow. You got to harvest it. You got to get it in the manufacturer. Then you got to get it into the stores. That's a process. And it doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't happen in 2 weeks. It doesn't happen in 3 weeks. This is an entire process that takes months, from tilling up the ground, putting it down, watering it, waiting for it to grow, coming in with a tractor, tilling it up, putting it in the warehouse, breaking it down, shipping it all around. So you understand, this is a process. So when we were warning about this months ago, we were trying to tell you then that the farmers were complaining about not having fertilizer, shortage of fertilizer, high cost of fertilizer, droughts, flooding, lack of help on farmland, high prices, they weren't getting the right amount of money for their crops. Well, we're about to experience all that. So that produced the famine, and they said that would fit the bill. So let me read that again. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, come together under one common purpose, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. They figured out a way to make you turn on your own self. So King admitted that the threat of global warming was merely just a ploy to justify an attack on humanity itself. This is now being rolled out as the Great Reset and the net zero carbon ruse that you climate activists are falling for. You are calling for your own destruction. In 2011, acting on advice from Joachim Schrellenberg, I totally butchered that, of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, PIC, Angela Merkel, and the German government imposed a total ban on nuclear electricity by 2022 as part of the 2001 government strategy called for the energy turn to rely on solar and wind and other renewables. The aim was to make Germany the first industrial nation to be carbon neutral. Now let's talk about the solar and wind. Solar, right? You have to make solar panels. That has an economical impact. Wind turbines, you have to make those. Those are economical impacts. Most of the wind turbines come from where? China. Do you know, I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head, but each turbine holds, I think, wind turbine holds, I believe, 6,000 gallons of oil in the base of it to oil it while it turns. Those 6,000 gallons of oil often fail and leak into the earth. Also, those 6,000 gallons of oil have to be changed. Yeah, you getting it yet? This is a shame. The strategy has been an economic catastrophe, going from having one of the industrial world's most stable, low-cost, and reliable electric generation grids. Today, Germany has become the world's most expensive electric generator. According to the German Energy Industry Association, BDEW, at the latest by 2023, when the last nuclear plant closes, Germany will face electricity shortfalls. Now, this was a prediction back in February of 2022. So now we're seeing, of course, all over the news, right? All over the news that this is exactly what's happening, right? They're telling in Germany right now, they're having to set up heating stations in public libraries, in public buildings, so that people can go get warm because they can't afford to heat their own homes because it now costs 4 times what it did 2 years ago. You have to wonder when we read this stuff to you and when we tell you about this stuff and you don't want to believe it, why does it always come true? The strategy has been for an economic catastrophe going. So again, they had one of the world's most stable, low cost, and reliable electric grids in the whole world, and now they're the most expensive. But it's all in the name of getting rid of carbon. At the same time, coal, the largest source of electric power, is being phased out to reach net zero carbon. Now, listen to that statement. How can you phase out coal for electric power when if you have charging stations for electric cars need power, need electricity? Where do they get the electricity? From the coal plant. To make that electric car, where do they get the coal to fire up the plant to make the car? From a coal mine. It's coal electricity. To use an earth mover, which you must move 100,000 pounds of earth to make a 1,000-pound battery. And an earth mover uses 60,000 gallons of diesel per 12-hour shift. So if you have to move 100,000 pounds of earth to make a 1,000-pound battery for an electric car, and the earth mover uses 60,000 gallons of diesel per 12-hour shift, what kind of impact does that have on the economy? These giant craters they leave in the earth after they get done getting the stuff they need to make the batteries, what kind of impact does that have? This is crazy, folks. This doesn't even make common sense. The strategy has been at the same time, coal, the largest source of electric power, is being purchased is being phased out to reach the net zero carbon. Traditional energy intensive industries such as steel, glass production, basic chemicals, paper, the cement manufacturing, they're facing soaring costs and shutdowns or offshoring and loss of millions of skills jobs once again right here in the United States, right? And then in each country respectively to its own. The energy inefficient wind and solar today cost 7 to 9 times more than natural gas. 7 to 9 times. That's why people are seeing such huge increases. And by the way, America, in this new bill that this administration passed, you just received a 17% tax on coal, which raised your electric bill 17%, which you will see. Right? Germany has little sun compared to tropical countries. So wind is seen as a major source for green power. There's a huge input of, so they don't even have a lot of sun to do solar. They have to count on the wind blowing. There's a huge input of concrete and aluminum needed to produce solar and wind farms. That needs cheap energy, right? Gas or coal or nuclear or something to produce it. And as that's phased out, the cost becomes prohibitive, even with no added carbon taxes. So you have to have steel, you have to have all this stuff to make the energy. It doesn't, guys, doesn't make any sense, except for they just want to go after the Great Reset. Germany already has some 30,000 wind turbines, more than anywhere else in the EU. The gigantic wind turbines have serious problems of noise or infrasound health hazards for residents nearby, the huge structures and weather and bird damage. These things whack a bunch of birds, right? Giant things spinning, birds just cruising along. That's it. By 2025, an estimated 25% of existing German windmills will need replacement, and waste disposal is a colossal problem. 2025, which is 2 years away, an estimated 1/4 of the existing German windmills, so 30,000, right? So that would be 7,500 roughly, 7, 14, 20. Yeah, so 7,500 wind turbines will need replacement, and waste disposal is a huge problem. Where do you put these things? You got these giant wings that are 100 feet long. Not wings, but fan, whatever you call it, right? You got the pole that's 200 feet, I don't even know how tall these things are. Where do you put that? Where do you dispose of that of? Is that environmental friendly? Does that disintegrate? Steel, when you put it in the ground, does that disintegrate? Yeah. No. So already by 2025, they're going to have to replace 1/4. They've only had them for 4 or 5 years. So you're telling me every 7 to 8 years, you got to replace 1/4 of them? Does that make sense? These companies are being sued as the citizens realize what a disaster they are. To reach targets by 2030, Deutsche Bank, we've heard about them, haven't we? Recently admitted the state will need to create an eco-dictatorship. At the same time, the German push to end gasoline or diesel transport by 2035 in favor of e-vehicles is on course to destroy Germany's largest and most profitable industry, the auto sector, and take down not only millions of jobs, but destroy millions of lives. The lithium-ion battery-powered vehicles have a total carbon footprint when the effects of mining lithium and producing all the parts are included, that is worse than diesels. The carbon footprint is worse than a diesel car or truck. And the amount of added electricity needed for zero carbon Germany by 2050 would be far more than today, as millions of battery chargers will be needed. Grid electricity with reliable power. You can't have solar to power the charging stations if they don't have any sun. You can't have wind turbines that, if it's not windy, aren't producing any electricity, because it will shut down the economy. If you got 1 million cars sitting around waiting to charge, no wind and no sun. It's a snowy, cloudy day. So what? Does the economy just stop? This doesn't make sense, folks. And the amount of electricity needed for zero carbon Germany by 2050 would be far more than today, as millions of battery chargers will be needed for that grid electricity with reliable power. Let that sink in, folks. Let that sink in. You have to have reliable electricity to charge these cars. Am I saying it's a totally bad idea altogether? Yes. When you see the crater these things leave in the earth, the answer is yes, it is. So now Germany and the EU begin to impose new carbon taxes, allegedly to finance a transition to zero carbon. So again, they're going to imply taxes take more of your money in order to get to zero carbon, which is just stealing your money. The taxes will only make electric power and energy even more expensive, ensuring that the faster collapse of the German industry, especially the auto industry. Now, depopulation, according to those advancing the zero carbon agenda, it is just what they desire. The deindustrialization of the most advanced economies, a calculated, decades-long strategy, as Maurice Strong said, to bring about the collapse of industrialized civilizations, to get rid of people, to turn the present world industrial economy backward to a wood-burning stove, which they want to ban in America and Germany and other places. Windmill turning dystopias with these giant things erected everywhere, where blackouts would become the norm because there's no wind, there's no sun, like they are in California, is an essential part of the Great Reset transformation under the Agenda 2030, the UN Global Compact for Sustainability. When you hear that word sustainability, it's just total bullshit. Merkel climate advisor, whatever his name is, Schallenberg, whatever, in 2015 presented a radical green agenda for the Pope Francis. The Laudato Si, as Francis appointee to the Pontifical Academy of Science. Some of these words, man, who comes up with this crap? And he advised the EU on its green agenda. In 2015 interview, he declared that science has now determined that the maximum carrying capacity of a sustainable human population was some 6 billion fewer people. Well, I mean, I guess that's better than what we thought. We thought it was 500 million. Now he's saying 2 billion people can hang out on the earth. So that's, you know what? That's only 3/4 of the earth gone, 3/4 of the people on earth gone. That's cool. Every 3 out of 4 people you know will be gone. It's a good idea, right? In a very cynical way, it's a triumph for science because at last we have stabilized something, namely the estimates for the carrying capacity of the planet, namely below 1 billion people. I spoke too fast. Oh, that's right, because when this was put up, it was 7 billion people. We surpassed 8. Okay. So they went below 1 billion people, right? That could be anything. That could be the 500 million that we were talking about. To do that, the industrialized world must be dismantled. Christina Figueres, of World Economic Forum agenda contributor and former executive secretary of the UN's Framework Convention on Climate Change, mouthful, right? Revealed that true aim of the UN climate agenda in February of 2015 Brussels press conference, where she stated, "This is the first time in human history that we are setting ourselves the task of intentionally changing the economic development model that has reigned since the Industrial Revolution." Figueres' 2015 remarks are echoed today by French President Macron, whatever the hell his name is, at the January 2021 World Economic Forum's Davos agenda, where he claimed that under the current circumstances, the capitalist model and open economy are no longer feasible. Macron, a former Rothschild banker, shocker, claim that the only way to get out of this epidemic is to create an economy that is more focused on eliminating the gap between the rich and the poor, which means get rid of the poor. For those of you that are challenged to understand what things mean, Merkel, Macron, Gates, Schwab, and his friends will do so by bringing living standards in Germany and the OECD down to levels of Ethiopia or Sudan. This is their zero carbon dystopia. Severely limit air travel, car travel, people movement, closing polluting industries, all to reduce CO2. Uncannily, how conveniently the coronavirus pandemic sets the stage for the Great Reset, the UN Agenda 2030 net zero carbon. It's very simple, folks. We're bottom feeders to them. But what I want you to take away from this is right now, is currently we still outnumber them by a lot. By a lot. Let's just say 1 billion of them feel this way. There's still 7 billion of us that don't. Now, I don't know where you come from, but if you're at a bar and a fight is about to happen between you and 7 other people, if you got any brains, apologize. If you have any brains, you would run. Right? You're at a bar or anywhere, and all of a sudden 7 people were about to fight you. If you had any brains at all, you would run for the mountains, for the hills, so some secret location. Right? Folks, this is very simple to see. You just have to open your eyes up. And we have to talk to people about this. We have to show people videos like this where it breaks it down so simple that how can you watch this podcast and not see this? How could you watch this and not understand what I'm saying? If you love your children and your grandchildren, hell, if you're even narcissistic and just love yourself, you shouldn't agree with what's happening. We're running out of time, folks. We're running out of time. Show this, share it, spread it, get people to see it, sit them down, make them watch it. We're running out of time, and it's your duty to wake up people. It's your job to wake up your neighbor. It's your job to wake up your other neighbor. It's your job to wake up your cousin. It's your job to wake up your mom. It's your job to wake people up. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for morning headlines. And I'll see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. for Just Thinking.